Let's get right to the news. Gary Gensler, this is coming from his non-hacked Twitter account. The SEC Twitter account was compromised and an unauthorized tweet was posted. SEC not approved for the listing of trading for spot Bitcoin ETF. This was basically on January 9th, 426, right after the tweet went out. So immediate action went into play. And if you look at some things that happened when this, I'll just show you the headline here. Twitter did confirm that this was the case. I still cannot imagine Twitter reacting this fast, even to the SEC, because when you look at the timeline of events, it was pretty fast. In this article right here, it was rather due to an unidentified individual obtaining control over a phone number. So possibly maybe some sort of related individual to, this is getting weird. All right, so here's a clip just giving Gary Gensler's New Year resolutions. Kind of funny here, listen in.
Here at the SEC, we have 3 New Year's resolutions. First, to protect investors. Second, facilitate capital formation. And third, maintain fair, orderly, and efficient markets. This year, we have more work to do, more items on the agenda, updating our stock markets or equity market system, or promoting greater cybersecurity in the financial sector itself. In 2024, ultimately, our New Year's resolution is to make sure that the markets work for you, the investor, the issuer, and not the other way around. Now that's some holiday cheer.
These guys are terrible on video, but the fact that they want to do cybersecurity, maybe they started a little bit too late here. I think maybe they should have actually kind of implemented that. Here's Caitlin Long kind of hitting it. Oh my God, thank you. Really it boils down to just a meme fest that became something out there on Twitter around what is happening. I think anything like what we're seeing today in the financial markets, when you see these missteps from, the almighties, it kind of flows into some very interesting things. So let me just go over and show you some of the parodies.
Hey guys, Gary Gensler over here. Oh, sorry. Mistakes were made with ETF we controlled. This is why cryptocurrency is very risky. It's not our fault. It's not our fault. It might have been a T-Mobile SIM swap or something. Even though we couldn't protect our Twitter account, we promised to protect the hundreds of millions of Americans that believe in us. Hey Gary, do you want me to close the short? Yeah, close it. And then open up a long for tomorrow. Okay.
All right, so fun times out there, but it does, getting on a more serious note, does this really change the course of what's going to happen with the ETF? Some people think this has a lot more implications than just a hacked Twitter account and a tweet that may have been actually scheduled in that account to go out. But listen into this next clip from CNBC.
This is embarrassing, to say the very least. What happens if another company did this? The SEC, I think, would be all over it, investigating, trying to find out what happens. Who investigates the SEC?
Since Bitcoin is a commodity, the CFTC could also be involved.
What happens if the SEC approves this Bitcoin ETF today or tomorrow? I mean, that just seems like such a crazy timeline to have all of this play out.
I don't know that a hacker getting access to the account means that timeline should change, given what an enormous part of the financial markets they are, but it certainly complicates things.
So there's a couple of things you could look at here. One, of course, is could the SEC maybe fall back on this as a crutch and simply say, hey, listen, this is market manipulation. We got to deal with this situation before we can approve. That could be the case. Or, things could go just as planned and go on through, but the market impact maybe has already actually happened. So this, I think, gets, to their point, does get a little bit more complicated for sure. A funny thing right here from Gensler also, this reminder, secure financial accounts as well as protect you against identity fraud and theft. And using, ridiculous statements there under the circumstances right now. But I think this is a problem that we're going to continue to see, unfortunately, around the financial industry. And I think this is where it boils down to just making sure that we need a solution. And in reality, you think about Web3 and what blockchain is already moving to, there's actually a solution kind of already in play. We'll talk about that in a minute, of what that might mean for crypto, especially for financial transactions and even media in the future. Here was a clip by the TD Ameritrade, their former CEO, and he talks a little bit more detailed about his opinions on Gensler. Listen in.
If you are Gary Gensler, if you're running a major organization that is vital to millions of investors like you did at TD Ameritrade, what are you doing right now?
The biggest concern, and I'm not a conspiracy theory guy, and I'm not a doomsday guy. There are a lot of ways you can bring down a country. Okay, chemical, biological might be one of them, but maybe the two most significant ones would be nuclear and cyber. So cyber is as important as it's ever been in the history of mankind. It's going to be more important tomorrow and more important down the road. Then what does that say about investors' confidence in the market? Market manipulation was something Eamon had already talked about. But I think there's another piece to this. To sit around and act like this will never, ever happen again, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, this is pretty lowbrow stuff from a hacker perspective. This guess the password, the SEC. They probably weren't using two-factor authentication, where you get the text to your phone. This is a federal government agency that is designed to protect investors, and they didn't protect themselves. What's going on?
I go back to taking responsibility for your own actions. So you go back to FTX and the problems with regard to that. Well, crypto needed a digital solution for a digital market. And the SEC was pretty good coming in and doing enforcement, but they weren't doing a good job of being able to help structure that in a way where it would be more transparent and it would function more smoothly and efficiently. So, look, it's still, Brian, it's going back to, like, somebody is responsible. I don't mean the hacker, but it's the organization that has responsibility. Now, your point, if this is a little odd lot thing that anybody can kind of do and hack into it, well, then, oh, my God, it's the SEC and the other side of his Twitter. By the way, there's no love lost over time between Gensler and Musk. So I can see that heating up.
So interesting points there. Of course, he mentioned a little bit about Elon Musk and his tiff with the SEC. This goes all the way back to 2018 when Musk was charged with securities fraud around misleading tweets. So interesting how times have turned. It's for sure. Further into this, this is where a lot of the legislators kind of looked at this and said, yeah, all right, this is a problem. And this, of course, coming from Bill Hagerty. SEC would be deemed accountability from a public company if they made such a colossal market mistake. This is a problem. Congress is going to try to get something done. We'll see about that. And then, of course, Huizenga comes in. Does this mean we can blame more of the SECs for horrible rulemaking and so-called regulation? Compromised account, just not taking care of their own business and dealing with their own house. And here's Loomis. Fraudulent announcements, like the one that was made by the SEC. Social media can manipulate markets. Obviously, we know that. And we need a lot more transparency on what happened. So I think that needs to be. The interesting point is that, Gensler has not necessarily made a real statement yet, nor has the SEC, other than, hey, we were hacked. Here's Meta Lawman to that point. Weirdest part of Gary Gensler's message, think about it, no apology for the harm done. None whatsoever. So I think that's going to be the bigger point here that will be addressed maybe into the market. And here's the question is, does this affect the ETF? Not necessarily in the fact that it's going to be approved, because I feel like that's going to be done. But does this affect the strategy in which market makers go into it in this next day? Maybe a little bit more cautious, a little bit more trepid, in terms of how they approach it. Other attorneys, there was Todd Phillips. Just remember, because Bitcoin is a commodity, the securities wrappers aren't trading yet. If this hack was done for market manipulation purposes, it's in the CFTC's jurisdiction. So back to what they said earlier on the CNBC clip, is that CFTC could actually end up in the driver's seat around investigating the SEC around this. So for market manipulation, Stuart Alderati, per its own rules, within 4 days, the SEC should close the incident's nature and scope and the impact on the market, along with a description of its process for assessing, identify, preventing such, obviously, future threats down the road. So we'll see if that actually happens, if there is some sort of response and how the CFTC gets involved. I just wonder if government agencies are actually going to do a full enforcement of themselves. Yeah, that'd be like asking the Pentagon to audit itself. I don't think so. All right, biting my tongue so hard it's bleeding. Of course, this is Paul Graywall coming over from Coinbase attorney. And here was Eleanor Tarrant kind of hitting on a few more things. Same government is trying to get trading platforms, payment processors, wallet providers, and the like to report customers' personally identifiable information. Yeah, this gets troublesome because if we are in this state right now, this requires a lot of identification-capable systems and software. And if you think about where that might be going, well, the web is really already put into a place right now when you think about Web3 and digital ID. I want to jump to a clip right here. This is James Seyffert. He's talking about whether or not this will affect this going forward on approval day. Listen in.
It certainly is not a good look, I guess. I don't know. I can't imagine the SEC writing up a denial letter, and I have to assume they have the approval letters written up based on everything we've seen. So I can't imagine they're going to go through and change the entire, these are long letters that they write, and change it to denial language, and one of those denials be because the SEC Twitter account was compromised, or X account, whatever you want to say. So I don't think it'll have an impact, but yeah.
Well, listen, we're going to find out, I think, around 5 p.m. today, Eastern time, of whether or not this will have an effect on just at least the approval. The question will be, how does Bitcoin respond? How do the markets respond in crypto in general? And if you look at what mainstream media was doing, I was kind of surprised at this spin, but in reality, it makes perfect sense. Listening to this clip to see what they said about Twitter was responsible.
Okay, and so I'm just going to reiterate it one more time. It would appear that X has been hacked, that the U.S. government, the SEC, has not been hacked. Focus on the SEC website, perhaps, rather than some of the social media platforms.
Exactly. From your standpoint, Dimitri, is this easy to do? Is it your impression that Twitter's security is porous?
Well, it's been poor for quite some time, for many years, and I find it hard to believe that after firing more than half of the employee base, it's gotten any better.
I think this really boils down to mainstream media not necessarily liking what Musk does. In reality, you know, these types of authentication processes are no different in your bank account than they are on things such as Twitter. Sure, you have two-factor. In some cases, you've got some physical ID. And with banks, you know, it does have a little bit more in terms of the qualifier checks. But I think that's what we're getting to with what Twitter's been able to do. I would say this is just as good as any of the other social media platforms out there. I think the question might boil down to whether or not the SEC should be doing announcements like this on Twitter at all. That might be something that could be playing into the future here. All right, so here's another clip just to kind of show you maybe there is a solution already in place. And this is Mr. Charles Hoskinson. Listen in.
Hi, this is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live. So, verified tweets. What Bob would do is register a decentralized identifier. And the DID is a W3C standard. And the whole space has moved in this particular direction. There's two things that you get out of this concept instantly. First off, you never need a password again. What's going to happen is James does not have the ability to replicate the signature. So what will happen is it'll appear different in the GUI. And in the GUI, it'll say unsigned, unverified. They honestly, in 2023, shouldn't be where they're at. They should embrace these types of cryptographic credentials. They're quite easy to work with. Our industry pioneered the innovation of these types of things. And if you don't, you run into a situation where all tweets are created equally, and then you end up having really bad tweets, which create market disruptions, market manipulations, and all kinds of things.
I mean, Charles is right here to a point, is that Web3 does kind of fix this, or at least it amplifies up the security layers of how digital ID can be done within the internet. And I think this will be something that we'll continue to see more advancements on. If you look at what Polygon is doing right here, rise of AI tools, AI-generated media, et cetera, distinguishing truth from lies is difficult. So they've basically gone in and started a partnership with Fox to do a public verification process using Web3 tactics and tools. So already moving in this direction, and this is something I've talked about before on media, is that blockchain and decentralized media is coming. We're going to see a solution, especially around Web3. I think podcasts will most likely lead the way, and what it might look like from digital ID and on the Web3 ecosystems that are out there. So the fact that they're already moving in this direction, you know, media provenance right there, Polygon. Interesting. And just talk about where, because, you know, Twitter really should be doing this. And I don't understand. I mean, I completely get Elon's got a lot on his plate, but at the same time, they're actually regressing in their overall strategy. Just in from today was that they ended their NFT support for Twitter profiles. So I look at that, but I also kind of go on the other hand and I think, all right, well, maybe the concept is that, he's pivoting the company, if you think about it. If you look at their tax position and how much they've been able to pull back down and redistribute. Remember, as a private company, they don't have to list a lot of those stockholders. So how did those losses get forwarded back over to the future of where Twitter is going? So I think there are bigger strategies here at Twitter. Now, whether or not they stay in the blockchain theme, I think this would be a perfect example of how decentralized media could be integrated, especially with something like Twitter, for verification. And verification and provenance would be one of the key things I think that would advance a very interesting point out there on social media to solve problems like this with the SEC. So we're going to be covering this all day around the ETF, what kind of impact it's going to have. We'll get into another video on fees. Some things are starting to brew there, so make sure and stick around if you're not already subscribed to the channel. Make sure and just hit the subscribe button right now. If you guys want to catch me out there on X, it's @PaulBaron. Catch you next time right here on TechPath.